For nearly 85 years, virtually all helicopters have flown using the same cyclic, collective, and pedal controls that Igor Sikorsky first demonstrated in 1940. But that is all about to change, because Skyryse has a better configuration that uses a single control stick that they're selling for the Robinson R66. And it makes flying a helicopter, well, easy. And they plan to put their product in fixed-wing aircraft as well. So please stick around and I'll tell you about my experience flying this revolutionary new helicopter configuration. Hello again and welcome to Aviation News Talk, where we talk general aviation. My name is Max Truscott. I've been flying for 50 years. I'm the author of several books and the 2008 National Flight Instructor of the Year. And my mission is to help you become the safest possible pilot. Last week in episode 338, we talked about Loft Dynamics' full-motion virtual reality helicopter simulator for the H-125 helicopter. So if you didn't hear that episode, you may want to check it out at aviationnewstalk.com/338. And if you're new to the show, welcome. Glad you found us. Great to have you here. Now, so that you stick around, if you would take a moment right now in the app that you're using to listen to us, touch either the subscribe key, or if you're using the Apple Podcast app or Spotify, the follow key, so that next week's episode is downloaded for free. And of course, this is a listener-supported show. We've got a number of different ways you can show your love and support for the show. If you would, check out our support page at aviationnewstalk.com/support, where you'll find links to support the show via Patreon, PayPal, Venmo, and Zelle. And when you do, I'll read your name on the show. Coming up in the news for the week of July 15th, 2024, AirVenture starts next week with some new rules. The TFR around the Republican National Convention caught a pilot, and a swimmer swept out to sea uses a novel approach to requesting a helicopter rescue. All this and more, and the news starts now. From FlyingMag.com, EAA adopts new procedures in wake of AirVenture crash. One strike and you're out. That rule is among the changes for the EAA AirVenture in Oshkosh next week in response to a deadly mid-air collision between a helicopter and a gyrocopter last year. The aircraft were flying in the pattern of the Fun Fly Zone, or FFZ, located in the ultralight area. The NTSB determined that the accident occurred when the gyroplane pilot violated established and brief procedures by making a prohibited 360-degree turn in the pattern. The pilot and passenger of the helicopter were killed, and the pilot and passenger of the gyrocopter were seriously injured. According to the final NTSB report, in addition to the one-strike rule, the EAA has adopted the following changes to prevent future mishaps: standardized traffic pattern for all types of FFZ operations, standardized aircraft spotter locations, and designated sterile corridor for traffic on the base leg over the north-south paved road. From jsonline.com, aircraft intercepted near Milwaukee for flying in the RNC's restricted flight zone. Officials intercepted an aircraft on Tuesday afternoon that was flying within the TFR during the Republican National Convention. The FAA had a TFR around Milwaukee that had a 30-mile radius. The aircraft intercepted was 24 miles southwest of Milwaukee and wasn't in communication with ATC. NORAD didn't specify the type of aircraft intercepted or the identity of the pilot, but flight tracking data indicates an aircraft was flying from Indiana to Oshkosh. The aircraft took off at 3:22 p.m. and was scheduled to land around 5 p.m. Officials dispatched an F-35 to intercept the aircraft, and the jet located the aircraft in question and safely escorted them from the area. And since it's an election year, we're going to have lots of TFRs all over the country, so definitely get a briefing before you fly. From avweb.com, Chino Electra took off with full flaps. The NTSB says a Lockheed 12A Junior Electra that crashed on June 15th in Chino, California, took off with full flaps, despite warnings from ground crew. The vintage twin was taking part in a Father's Day event, and the flight was a rehearsal for a three-plane formation during the display later in the day. Quote, during the engine start, the ground crew warned the flight crew with a hand and arm signal that the flaps were extended. From the ground crew's experience and observations with a recent airplane, they felt the flaps were fully extended during taxi and the takeoff on runway 26 right. The plane got no more than 300 feet above the ground before it pitched up, slewed left, and crashed near the perimeter fence. The people aboard were killed. The plane belonged to the Yanks Air Museum based in Chino. And from the mercurynews.com, my home newspaper, the San Francisco Bay Area cops bust a serial airplane thief. Police say they caught a man attempting to pull off the theft of multiple airplanes. The 28-year-old Concord resident has now been charged with 6 felonies, including attempted grand theft and attempted fraud. It all started when a local airplane owner learned of a pending sale of his airplane, which he had not authorized nor had any prior knowledge of. When the Contra Costa Sheriff's Office investigated, they were able to find other airplane owners who'd had similar experiences. It led them back to the Concord man who claimed to be an airplane broker who was assisting local pilots with the buying and selling of airplanes. But police have a different theory. They believe the man would contact airplane owners posing as an interested potential buyer, ask detailed questions about their plane, and then use those details to set up fake online ads for the plane. To help ensure a sale, the planes would be offered at prices well below market value. The end goal was to sell planes that weren't really his, pocket the money, and disappear. Police say they found footage of the man accessing planes at Buchanan Field Airport in Concord, and that he was found in possession of several airplane keys and documents related to the sale of airplanes. The suspect is out on bail while his case is pending. From electric.co, Joby Aviation recently completed a 523-mile eVTOL flight in California by using hydrogen electric propulsion. The article says, we saw Joby achieve its first flight with a pilot on board in October 2023, quickly leading to a demonstration in New York City ahead of full-fledged air taxi operations expected to begin in 2025. In 2021, Joby acquired hydrogen electric propulsion specialist H2Fly and helped it complete a piloted flight of its own in September 2023. Since then, Joby has begun exploring the integration of hydrogen fuel cells in its eVTOL aircraft, and recently completed a test flight in one that delivered some of the most extended zero-emission flight ranges seen to date. According to Joby, it completed the hydrogen-powered eVTOL flight around its facilities in Marina, California on June 24th, traveling 523 miles over the course of 4 hours and 47 minutes. When the aircraft landed, Joby stated it still had 10% of its hydrogen fuel remaining. Now, I've looked at the ground track. They stayed in the traffic pattern and flew at about 100 knots at altitudes that vary between 500 and 1,500 feet, which makes sense because you probably want to stay close to a runway when you're testing something new. Looking ahead, Joby says it will continue to pursue a start of commercial operations as soon as 2025 using its battery electric air taxi. Following the success of its first hydrogen eVTOL, we can expect to see those aircraft make their flights into future fleets for regional air travel as well. And there's some footage of the test flight, and that's included in our link in the show notes at aviationnewstalk.com/339. From avweb.com, Southwest Airlines and Archer Aviation partner on electric air taxi service in California. Last week, Southwest and Archer announced plans to develop electric air taxi service at California airports. As California's largest air carrier, operating at 14 airports across the state, Southwest said it was eager to explore the convenience Archer's air taxis could provide for customers in busy urban areas. According to an Archer spokesman, by putting together Southwest's impressive network of airports in California and their frequent intrastate flights with our planned network, Southwest customers could someday complete door-to-door trips like Santa Monica to Napa in less than 3 hours. From apnews.com, a Southwest jet that did a Dutch roll was parked outside during severe storm. Investigators say a Southwest jet that experienced an unusual Dutch roll in flight had been parked outside during a strong storm and then underwent routine maintenance, after which pilots noticed odd movements of the rudder pedals. After the May 25th incident, Southwest mechanics found substantial damage in the aircraft's tail, where the rudder is located, but the NTSB said Tuesday that it hasn't determined when the damage occurred. The plane, a Boeing 737 MAX, was grounded for more than a month, but resumed flights last week. Dutch roll is a swaying rhythmic combination of yaw and the wingtips rocking up and down. The Southwest jet experienced the movement at 34,000 feet and again after descending to 32,000 feet while flying from Phoenix to Oakland, California. The condition can be dangerous, and modern planes have a yaw damper to stop the oscillations that characterize Dutch roll. After the plane landed, Southwest mechanics found fractures in the metal bracket and ribs that hold a backup power control unit to the rudder system. On May 23rd, The plane underwent scheduled maintenance, and afterwards pilots noticed the rudder pedals moving when the yaw damper was engaged. Pilots on that May 25th flight felt the pedals moving during the Dutch roll and even after landing. John Cox, a safety consultant, said the preliminary report indicates the plane was most likely damaged during the storm. He said the near hurricane-force winds could have caused the rudder on the parked jet to slam back and forth. Southwest inspected its 231 MAX jets last month and found no other cases of damage around the rudder power units and no problems in new planes it has received since, according to the NTSB. And finally, from PhoneArena.com, Apple Watch does it again by calling for a life-saving helicopter rescue. Even somebody who goes body surfing every morning can find themselves needing help from the Apple Watch when something goes wrong in the ocean. Rick Sherman, a 49-year-old who lives in New South Wales, Australia, was at Tallow Beach for his daily body surf when he got caught up in an ocean current that was carrying him away from land and pushed him out about 1 kilometer, or about 0.6 miles. After 20 minutes of fighting the current, he was experiencing cramps and starting to panic. He realized he couldn't make his way back to shore and that his partner, who was on the beach, left to go shopping and could not be counted on to help. Luckily, he remembered that he was wearing his Apple Watch. Even though he was in the midst of treading water, Sherman was able to make an emergency call by pressing the button under the digital crown and dragging the emergency call slider to dial for help. Quote, "I cupped a couple of big ones on the head and was held under for a while. I started to panic a bit and cramp up underwater there. It became clear after about 20 minutes that I wasn't going to make it back in and I needed some assistance." Rick was perplexed when asked whether he wanted police, fire, or ambulance. Not only did he not know how to respond, he had been pushed a long way out to sea. With the wind and the swells, he found it difficult to use the watch and had to hold it up to his ear to hear what was being said to him. Incredibly, he stayed on the call for 1 hour, directing emergency services to his location, and he was finally winched out of the ocean to safety by a rescue helicopter. Quote, "If it wasn't for being able to access that service in my watch, I'd probably be bobbing out somewhere in international waters by now. It's amazing that I was able to use that technology to save my life." Coming up next, a few of my updates. And later, you'll hear about my ride in the revolutionary new Skyryse helicopter simulator. All right here on the Aviation News Talk podcast. And now let's get to your good news. This comes from Mega supporter Dan Morris. He writes, "I recently graduated with my BA in aviation. I'll tell you why that's important in a moment. I am a CFI II in Shreveport, Louisiana. Just passed my commercial multi and building time for the restricted ATP minimums. Now, the ATP requires 1,500 hours, but there are a couple ways that you can do that with reduced hours. He's going for the 1,250 hours, and I had to look this up because I didn't recall the details. It says pilots who have completed 30 to 59 semester credit hours of approved aviation courses may be eligible for a 250-hour reduction, bringing the total required hours to 1,250. Well, congratulations to you, Dan. And Patreon Joe Silvernell writes, "I just passed my instrument check ride yesterday in my DA40NG at KPAE, that would be Payne Field up near Seattle. He says my new instrument rating, and I just wanted to say thank you. I was hearing your voice when deciding between activate leg and vectors to final on the G1000, and especially on the circle to land and subsequent missed approach procedures. Thanks for all you do for aviation safety." Well, Joe, congratulations. And if you have good news to share, it's easy to do. Just go out to aviationnewstalk.com and click on Contact at the top of the page, which is how you can always get in touch with me. And now for our new Video of the Week segment. Guess what? We've got two of them. This first one is associated with a news story. It's about a mountain biker who was rescued by a California Highway Patrol helicopter. That rescue was carried out at about 10,000 feet in the Sierra Nevada mountains. This biker had gotten off his bike and decided to climb a rock pinnacle without any climbing gear. And once he got on top, he realized that it wasn't safe to climb back down. And the opening shot of the video is just dramatic. As the helicopter circles, there's a shot of this tiny rock tower that just juts straight up from the mountain. The climber is on top of this tiny, tall rock pinnacle. So it's an amazing view, and the rest of the video shows the rescue. And our second video of the week comes from Australia. It was shot by a 7 News helicopter, and it captures the final approach to Bankstown Airport of a Cessna Turbo 210 which had lost power and was gliding to the airport. Now, this plane is just barely skimming the rooftops, and it lands gear up because it needed the least amount of drag in order to reach the runway after that loss of power. And you can find links to both of these videos in our show notes at aviationnewstalk.com/339. And it's happened again. I can't believe this. A Cirrus aircraft on the ground had an accidental deployment of its parachute when there was lightning in the area. Now, this happened in late June in Jacksonville, Florida, while the aircraft was in an outside tie-down position. It's a 2008 turbo-normalized SR-22. It did have the newer electronic trigger mechanism for the parachute. Now, I know of two other similar occurrences. One was just last year, and it was also in Florida. In July 2023, a Cirrus SR-20 was struck by lightning while in the run-up area at the Opa-locka Executive Airport in Florida, and the caps deployed. Now, the weather 15 minutes before the event was reported as 230 at 8, visibility 10, light thunder showers and rain, overcast 4,200 feet, temperature 31, dew point 24. And the weather reported about 20 minutes after the event was similar, but included the note, lightning in the distance in all quadrants. And the first occurrence that I ever heard of this occurred in Lynchburg, Virginia in July of 2017. Here's what aeronews.net said at the time. ANN reader Eric Gunderson, who coincidentally we've had on this show back in episode 130 when we were talking about the factors around an SR-22 crash in Southern California. Continuing on, Eric Gunderson, who sent us an email this week saying that a Cirrus sitting on the ramp empty was affected by lightning at KLYH, Lynchburg, Virginia, and the chute deployed. According to Gunderson, the airplane appears to be a 2016 or newer Cirrus with electronic ignition on the rocket. Cirrus began using a cap system with electronic ignition towards the end of 2013. In addition, the electronic ignition was installed in any aircraft which had its mandatory 10-year parachute repack done since that time. Gunderson said there was a fast-moving and devolving storm in that area when the incident occurred. There is also speculation that it was from P-static or precipitation static, a nearby lightning strike, as a video capturing the event doesn't show lightning actually hitting the airplane. The airport and FBO staff wrapped the plane in a tarp to cover the hole created by the rocket and chute deployment, as well as contain the chute from catching the wind and dragging the airplane, thus saving the airplane an even more costly repair. And here's a note from patron supporter Patrick Mullane. He says, "Hi, Max. Continue to enjoy your show very much. I was intrigued by your analysis of the botched go-around in Hawaii of the Southwest Airlines flight. Your discussion about the infrequency of go-arounds reminded me of a study I referenced in my book, Mullane's Guide to Learning to Fly, which I sent you a while back. It was interesting to learn about how even airliners should do a go-around and don't. Thought I'd share that section of the book." And in part it says, in a 2017 study by the Flight Safety Foundation called Go-Around Decision-Making and Execution Project, it was found that failure to conduct a go-around is the #1 risk factor in approach and landing accidents, or ALAs, in commercial operations. The authors note another study that showed that between 1994 and 2010, unstable approaches made up 3.5% to 4% of all approaches, and that in 95 to 97% of those approaches, quote, flight crews whose airplanes were in this state continued the approach and landing. Further again, citing previous studies, the authors noted that, quote, approximately 65% of all accidents are ALAs, and that one analysis concluded that more than 80% of ALAs would have been preventable if the crew had decided to go around. What's true of commercial pilots is doubly true of GA pilots. We are, I think, even more reluctant as a group to initiate a go-around. Why? Almost certainly a big part of it is ego. Pilots tend to have healthier egos than the general population, and, whether they know it or not, might internalize the old fighter-pilot mantra, better dead than look bad. To the extent that some may view a go-around as an admission of failure because it implies the approach was not perfect, this attitude can be seriously dangerous. Second, at a busy airport, doing a go-around might feel like an inconvenience to other aircraft or air traffic controllers. You've upset their finely tuned plans, and you've also added time, cost, and stress to your flight. I think it's also possible that many pilots are simply afraid of go-arounds, viewing them as dangerous maneuvers. You are low to the ground, you are slow, you have flaps extended. All these factors, along with the forces the plane will experience when you apply full throttle and try to climb out, may lead pilots to make inaccurate judgments about relative risk. In other words, pilots may convince themselves that while their approach is unstable, and there is risk in that, a go-around has risk as well, and those might be higher. While there may be some scenarios where this may be true, it's highly unlikely that in all the scenarios where a go-around was not selected, the risk of the go-around was greater than continuing the approach. One reason all these factors are at play is that go-arounds are just not practiced enough during training. I don't think I did more than 3 in 7 months. It's my belief that many instructors, when thinking about how to use precious training time, bias themselves to using it for an actual landing. After all, when you do your FAA check ride, it's guaranteed that you'll have to demonstrate your landing ability. You won't necessarily be asked to demonstrate a go-around, though it's important to remember that during your check ride, you can always initiate a go-around yourself if your setup for landing is not ideal. Well, Patrick, thanks so much for sending that along. And here's a note from Trevor Moody. He writes, Max, that was a very interesting interview in episode 336 with Jim Simon regarding the CAPS parachute pull out of Renton, Washington. I was flying with my instructor just ahead of them. In fact, prior to their engine failure, we were watching them on ADS-B to make sure we had adequate separation. When we heard them report an engine issue and then the CAPS pull, it certainly got our attention. I'm not surprised that Jim said he felt calm during the event. He certainly sounded very calm on the radio. At the time, we were concerned that they were going to end up in Lake Washington or I-405, which was jam-packed, as he reported. We were relieved to hear after we landed that they were both safe. I was very impressed to hear that Jim had put some planning into where to initiate the CAPS pull. On my side, with my AGI, or Advanced Ground Instructor, in hand, I am now teaching private ground school part-time at Galvin in Seattle and busy working on my MEI in the DA-42, spending a lot of time updating my lesson plans to the new CFI ACS. Thanks for all you do on the podcast. You continue to set an incredibly high standard. Trevor, thanks so much for that. And he also included the live ATC file, and I'll play just a very short portion of that, which includes all of Jim's transmissions. There were just 2 of them, and here's what that sounded like.
7 Charlie Sierra, engine failure. Roger, and please return direct to runway 16 and stay in temperature if you have highway personnel aboard. 2 more, we're not going to make that. 7 Charlie Sierra, okay, roger that, and if you know we're going to try and test the landing, just let me know. 27 Charlie Sierra, remove caps. 7 Charlie Sierra, okay, copy that.
And I did remove some of the space between transmissions, so that's all compressed versus the amount of time in which it actually occurred. If you haven't heard that episode, you may want to check it out at aviationnewstalk.com/336. And here's a short note from Jules Myers. He's one of our newer mega supporter. These are the folks who donate to the show at the $50 a month level via Patreon. Thanks for the kind note. My CFI, Mike Gingras, turned me onto your podcast, and I was hooked after the first episode. I'm a student pilot out of Aviation Adventures in Leesburg, Virginia, working on cross-country at the moment. Great to find a show whose creator is passionate about cultivating a culture of safety in the GA industry. As painful as it is to listen to the details of flights that have gone wrong, I feel like it helps to keep me out of trouble. Keep it up, Max. Jules, thanks so much. Appreciate that. And yes, sometimes it is hard to listen to these stories, and I think it does make us safer pilots. But I do try to balance it out a little bit with some interesting things, so hopefully it's not too much doom and gloom. And if you'd like to become a mega supporter like Jules or to support the show at any level, it is so easy to do. We would love to have you become not just a listener to the show, but a supporter of the show. All you need to do is just take a moment, stop right now, whatever it is you're doing, take the 2 or 3 minutes it takes to go on out to aviationnewstalk.com/support. And there you'll see 4 options for supporting the show financially. And when you're thinking about at what level to support the show, well, you might think about what you pay for an hour of dual time in the airplane. And you can choose to support the show either on a monthly level. If you do that through Patreon, you'll get some goodies, such as at the $20 a month level, you'll get access to all the videos I post. At the $35 level, you'll get access to my online courses. And as a mega supporter at $50 a month or more, I'll send you one of my signed books after 2 months. Of course, you can also support the show at lower levels as well. You can also make one-time donations if you prefer that through a PayPal, a Venmo, and Zelle. And if you choose not to support the show financially, well, there are other ways you can do it as well. One way to do that is to go out into whatever app you're using and write a 5-star review and tell other folks what you like about the show. And yet another way would be to tell 1 or 2 friends about the show and encourage them to sign up and subscribe. And of course, subscribing to the show is free. Thanks so very much for your support. Now, since aviation is such a small community, see if you know any of these people who've signed up to support the show over the past week. First, thanks to our one new Patreon supporter, who is David Flagg. Thanks very much. We also had a one-time donation via PayPal. Thank you, Daniel Reed. There was also a one-time donation via Venmo, thanks to Thomas Welling. And we had one person sign up to donate monthly via PayPal. Thanks so much to Andrew Francis. And again, thank you for supporting the show, however you choose to do it. Coming up next, you'll get to hear what it was like to fly the revolutionary new Skyryse helicopter controls for the Robinson R66. All right here on the Aviation News Talk podcast. And now let me tell you about Skyryse. As Vertical Magazine reported in February, Skyryse has revealed its cockpit configuration and started taking reservations for their aircraft called the Skyryse One. The Southern California-based startup has replaced the cyclic collective and pedals in a conventional helicopter cockpit with a single centrally mounted control stick and 2 touchscreen displays. The configuration is enabled by a triply redundant fly-by-wire flight control system and Skyryse's proprietary operating system, SkyOS. And this is probably the biggest news in the announcement. Skyryse says that their Skyryse One will be fully certified for instrument flight rules at half the cost of the cheapest IFR-certified helicopters today. Now, the availability of a cost-effective IFR-certified helicopter could greatly enhance safety in an industry where visual flight into IMC remains a leading cause of fatal accidents. At an introductory price of $1.8 million, the Skyryse One cost significantly more than a standard R66, which has a list price of just over $1.1 million. But Skyryse is betting that many private pilots and commercial operators alike will be willing to pay a premium for a substantial increase in safety and capability. The company now expects to certify the Skyryse One sometime in 2025. And frankly, I think the Skyryse system is a game changer for the helicopter industry, probably as big a change as the introduction of glass cockpits has been for general aviation. Years from now, I really think people are going to look back on this as a watershed moment when it became just so much easier to fly a helicopter that anyone can do it, and they'll be safer when flying in an aircraft with a Skyryse OS. And it sounds like Skyryse wants to deploy their systems not just in helicopters, but in aircraft as well. And the way that this will work is that Robinson will produce the R66, pass it over to Skyryse, who will then use an STC to install their equipment in that helicopter. By the way, if you're going to be in Oshkosh next week, you can see the same simulator that I flew in. So if you're interested in buying an easy-to-fly helicopter, stop by their booth. Now here's a recording of my time in the Skyryse simulator. Vice President of Sales Ray Wirt, who formerly flew the V-22 Osprey in the military, is sitting next to me in the simulator giving instruction.
So we're on runway 28 in Camarillo.
Okay.
You can't tell right now, but the rotors are turning, right? So we're at, let me go to ground idle. We'll go to ground idle because I want to show you something later. So okay. Rotors are turning, engines on, it's going back down to ground idle, but let's talk PFD first.
Okay.
So our primary flight display, synthetic vision. We'll talk a lot when we're up at altitude, and I'll show you different things on dynamic flight envelope and what it's telling you, but we need to do that when we're airborne. But just to orient yourself, airspeed, obviously, MSL altitude, AGL altitude, you know what this is, right?
Sure.
You have
not an HSI, but
exactly.
An indicator.
Yeah, an indicator.
Sure.
You have basically a small engine stack here, just in case you need to come off this. Oh, by the way, people ask, how real is like the software we have in this?
Yeah.
We actually unplug, if I pull up the alerts, we have to like disengage, disconnect, ADSB, et cetera, right? Because LAX would not be happy if they thought an aircraft was taking off right in this location. Yep. And I don't know about you, but I don't have time to go to prison. It's not a place I want to be.
Got it. So what you're saying, this is near exact software as you're going to be shipping.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, nearly identical, just with stuff so that it would be obviously not connected.
Right. Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Let's just kind of from a high-level view here. We've got the PFD on the top. We've got a second display below it, and then between the two of us here, how would you describe this? What would you call it?
That's our single control stick, is what I would call it. Yeah, and we'll walk through all the different kind of intuitive inputs here in a second, but it will allow you to go, forward, aft, left, right. We'll do pedal turns once we get them to a hover, and this essentially is replacing the collective. That's our vertical control stick.
Okay, so I just noticed that it does twist. So it looks like kind of a pistol type grip, and of course no pedals out here.
So I know, I joke with people. The first time I was in the aircraft, I'm like, it's the only time I've crossed my legs in an aircraft because I don't know. Because, you and I are used to this, right? We immediately go in this position, right? Ready to go?
Keep your feet off. Well, keep your feet back off the pedals, but in the ready position.
Yeah, so we have no pedals, no collective, no cyclic, just a single control stick, and we'll go through every maneuver you can possibly use.
All right, so you're back with the PFD before I interrupted. So go ahead.
Please. No. So primary flight display, and then the multifunctional display, right? So, I explained to non-pilots, really, it's like an iPad or a laptop, but essentially giving you multiple tabs for multiple different layers of information. Obviously, we can't put for navigation, but on the actual aircraft, like many, it will show you where your aircraft's located at the airport, down from nearest field, and we'll play around with some of these tabs up in altitude. What I do want to point out is, you and I are used to traditional cockpits where things sometimes ergonomically are not in the best position. But, our Robinson R66 is fantastic. The circuit breakers are down here. Very challenging if you have emergency and you're trying to react quickly. So in our aircraft, and again, we don't have a generator behind us, but it is all at the tips of your fingers for you to, access information as well as make entries for emergency, right? No longer air restarts. You lose an engine. We'll talk about the auto rotation a bit, but in a normal aircraft, you lose the engine, your heightened level of anxiety while you're trying to do a bunch of procedures. This is simply go to emergency and hit air restart.
Okay.
Again, we'll play around with more of these tabs when we get to airborne, but it's when it gets you somewhat acquainted with where you're at when we sit in the cockpit.
Got it. So I'm just looking at the size of the displays. They look like they're roughly 12, 13 inches diagonal, stacked on top of each other. The bottom one, we're split into, kind of looks like 3 or 4 panes. Along the right-hand side, we've got looks like comm information.
Yes.
Just to the left of that is an engine cluster, and together that's about half of the MFD. And then on the left half, we've got our moving map and a lot of buttons on top. Looks like, 10 or 12 of them that we can use to select what we're displaying in that left-hand side. And then in the middle, we've got fuel gauge and some battery...
fuel flow and battery levels, exactly.
Voltages, outside air temperature. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, and anti-ice?
Anti-ice.
Okay.
Well, we IFR-certified.
Right.
Skyryse One will be as well, right? Which is an important feature, I think, especially at the price point we're at, is a very advantageous feature, especially people who already have a fixed-wing license and they always want to fly helos or IFR rated.
And the anti-ice capability is which technology?
Ooh, I don't have that answer.
Okay. But apparently there's some anti-icing capability.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
All right. That's good to know.
Okay. So you and I have both flown in helicopters. We've been current, not current. And when we're not current, you go up and you try to go to a hover and it feels like the first time you've flown a helicopter.
Sure.
Because it's challenging. And I walk through people who haven't flown a helicopter. That skill set, of getting up to a 10 feet hover and just being stable takes a while, right? You're very familiar with that. So I'm going to show you in our system some of the ease of getting up into a hover. So first I want you to go to flight. So go ahead and select from ground idle to flight idle.
Okay, so I'm just going to slide this.
Just push flight.
Oh, it's push. Okay.
There we go. Yep. Okay, now what's interesting about the operating system, yes, we're going to show a lot of what it does up in the air, but as you know, it's not just up in the air, it's managing all of your control and operating systems. So you and I have, turned throttles on before, maybe gone too fast, potentially over temp, over torque, you name it. This aircraft will not allow that. So if it's noticing some abnormality or an exceedance, it will stop you from entering that profile or parameter that would damage the engine.
Right, so no chance of an overspeed, which is great because that's easy to do in a small helicopter.
It's the old bet, you put money on the dashboard, you start your aircraft, you start it right, put the money back in your pocket. If not, it goes in the service center. Okay, so what's neat about the system too, it's, again, typical traditional aircraft will have raw data that you and I are constantly digesting and making decisions on. This operating system is smart enough, will recognize the parameters you're in and give you options, assuming where you want to go next. So we are at 100% NR. We're on the ground.
Okay.
The system says more than likely Max probably wants to go up into a hover.
Sure.
Right? So we're going to go up, and you can do it, and you're going to swipe the white bar up to the top.
So on the upper left here, I'm sorry, lower left of the PFD, I'm going to swipe up about 2 inches.
Okay. It went to map.
Pick up in progress.
You'll see the torque start to increase, and as torque starts to increase, if you look up,
oh, there we go.
We'll come up.
Okay, we've just come up a few feet, and we are in a stable hover here.
Exactly.
And I have my hands on nothing. Basically.
And so you stole my punchline. So my thing at this point is we've done all of that, and I haven't even touched the control stick. Now, you and I know as a pilot, I would always have my hand on the see if I could, but I do that for a purpose that this is all doing it based on the operating system and its ability to manage that. Go ahead, please grab the control stick.
Okay.
So we'll start doing a few maneuvers, and then when we get up at altitude, we'll do more and more.
Okay.
But just to get you acquainted, you're familiar with pedal turns, right? Zero airspeed, and we're just turning the nose of the aircraft. So what I want you to do is just go ahead and twist the control stick to the right.
All right. So we're doing pedal turn here, I guess.
There we go. You'll start to see your rate.
Okay, yep.
There we go. You can keep going to the right, 90 degrees, 180. You can see what it's like in a tailwind if you want. But it will rotate until you stop moving the control stick.
Sure.
And then it'll stop in place.
Now, the rate looks fairly constant, whereas in a helicopter, the rate's constantly changing and you need to make a lot of adjustments.
But what you'll see if you pause here, because you as a helicopter pilot are really going to like this. So let's pause here, right?
Okay.
No, we have a direct tailwind. You and I have done this before in a helicopter.
Right.
Those who haven't don't understand that you can see the system working, right? It's but you and me in the aircraft, because the tail's constantly fluctuating. It's a lot of movement. So I think this really highlights some of the capability and the stability of the aircraft. So you can come right if you want.
Good. So we don't have the problem of weathercocking where the tail is trying to jerk left or right as the tailwind hits.
And it still is, but the operating system is just reacting to it.
Right.
Now, and you'll see as you come right? It's a natural aircraft like every other aircraft in the world. It likes wind lines, right? So as you come around, you'll see it will stay in a stable type of rate of turn, but you will start seeing it want to naturally gravitate towards that wind.
Sure.
Which, that's physics.
All right, so we're just about looking back down the runway again.
Okay. Now, I am going to kind of geek out a little bit because I want to show you something really neat.
Yeah, sure.
And then we'll go flying. So we talk about dynamic flight protection in a fly-by-wire system and an operating system like ours. So I call it, for people who haven't flown, it's really a safety bubble that keeps you in. You are familiar with settling with power, entering vortex ring state. I'm going to show you how the aircraft keeps you out of that when it recognizes you're entering that flight profile.
Okay.
So what I want you to do with the thumbstick is just come up on it.
So push forward on that a little bit.
And you'll start seeing your rate of climb. You can keep going up. Yeah, you can keep going up. We'll go up to about 50 feet AGL, roughly, somewhere on or about.
Got it. All right, so on the top of the pistol grip here, there's an extra little switch I'm pushing forward.
Here we go. Release that.
We're up climbing about 400 feet a minute. We're up at about 150 feet above.
There we go.
Okay, so now we're hovering at 160 feet MSL.
Exactly. Okay, now you and I know, and then I'll tell you how we do it here. If we bottom out the collective at 0 knots at this altitude, if you enter that vortex ring state, you're out of options. I tell fixed wing it's like an approach turn stall. You put yourself in a position where you're out of options, right? Outside of one, which you can't control. So what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to simulate that. So with that thumbstick, go all the way down.
Okay.
Like you want to max your rate of descent.
All right.
It's going to keep you at 300 feet per minute because it recognizes you're at 0 knots, and it's going to keep you out of that vortex ring state.
Sure.
Now I want to keep holding that and don't let go, because now we're approaching, 40 feet AGL, there's 30 feet, and just keep holding it and never release it. As you approach the ground, the system's going to recognize your rate of ascent and your propensity. You can let go at that point.
Okay.
Your likelihood of smacking on the ground, right, with a hard landing, and it's going to protect you from that.
Sure. Yeah, I can see it stopped at about 3 feet AGL. It wouldn't let me continue down into the ground. And by limiting it to 300 feet, then you're limiting the possibility of the vortex ring state.
And I tell people, I flew the V-22, $80 million aircraft. It still didn't do this. Now, it would notify me that I'm getting ready to enter the vortex ring state, but she would just tell me. She wouldn't prevent it, which I would have preferred her preventing it. Okay, so we're going to mess around more. I'm going to show different dynamic flight protections and maneuvers, but I will show different ways to interact with the system, and then we'll get airborne and we'll play around with the controls. So I've inputted 600 feet, 60 knots at 255. Let's adjust this to
as our targets references.
250. Exactly. Let me go. Let's go 250. I said right. So another way of interacting with the system, is simply selecting, excuse me, there we go, speed, altitude, I'll put heading in there as well. And it's just another way of interacting with our operating system. And you and I know, really what I tell people is, for me as a pilot, having different modes of operation minimizes my task saturation. If I'm in a certain, airport I'm not familiar with, I got traffic, I got weather, I got people talking to me, that is the pilot error is usually a task saturation point, right, of any pilot. And this is just a different way of operating with the system. Not as fun as we're going to have in a little bit, but I always like to highlight that when we take off the first time so that you have awareness that option is always there.
That's great. So I didn't even have my hand on the control stick here. You touch the speed, the heading, and the altitude selection buttons, entered, 60 knots, 600 feet, and we're zooming away with basically hands-off operation. It's doing it all itself.
And what's really neat, and then we'll actually, I promise, go flying. You can mess around the control stick. We are not on autopilot right now. So I stopped it at 59 knots, 370 feet at 251. This aircraft will continue to maintain this flight profile until I give it another input, not on autopilot. It's just an operating system that's taking in all the air data units, the weather, the winds, the pressure altitude, DA, knows what I want as a pilot, and will maintain that for me. So,
what if we have terrain ahead? Is it going to be smart enough to not let us fly into the terrain?
It will not direct you away from the terrain, but I tell people between the visuals we have with both yellow and red and on the synthetic vision, it's giving you notifications of the fact that are you within 500 feet or are you indeed, if we turn around, heading towards terrain in front of you.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
So it's going to warn me of the terrain. It's not going to actually stop me from.
It's not going to stop you. Okay. All right, now go ahead and grab the control stick.
Okay.
And I want you to make a right-hand turn, so just go lateral.
Okay.
You don't have to twist.
Leaning left
I'm right-hand, yeah, sorry.
Got it.
Let's actually go right.
Oh, you want?
I'm
sorry,
no worries,
right.
Not a problem, not a problem. I'm going to take you around the pattern.
Right here. Okay, going right, okay.
And keep going right. Now, what's interesting is, and you can max your angle of bang. Again, this dynamic flight protection is not going to allow you to enter a flight profile. It's going to put us in out-of-control flight, or going to put you in an exceeded rate of descent.
Okay. Yeah, and so I lean the control all the way right. It looks like we're in about a 30-degree bank and won't let me exceed that.
Okay.
We're going back this way?
Yeah, we're just going to eventually
kind of
hit it. Yeah, and again, what's nice about the sim is we don't have to worry, no towers yelling at us. Sure. So what I will do, too, is now you can mess around a little bit more with the control stick. So let's come up a little bit. And we'll get to about, 500-ish feet on MSL. And, I'm sorry, keep holding the thumb lever. So when you lift up on the thumb lever, it's like the pedal on your car. You're going to hold that, right, to whatever rate of descent or climb you want. Oh, you're at 0. Sorry. What we did. Okay, I'll show you what we did. That's my fault.
Go ahead, tell me.
Just release the stick.
Yep.
So what we did is you came back and you stopped the airspeed.
Ah, I see. Okay.
Yeah. But honestly, my airspeed was the next thing I was going to tell you, and you hit 500 feet. So now we're going to go ahead and play around with the airspeed.
Okay.
So the way we control airspeed is forward or back, kind of intuitive, right? It's intuitive once I teach you.
Okay.
Right now you're like, okay, I got it. So go ahead and grab the control stick.
Got it. So
and
I
just
pulled
go about
back
it
thinking that I needed to climb.
Think you were climbing, right?
Instead, what I did is I reduced the airspeed to 0.
And just go like a 1/4 inch forward on the stick.
Okay.
Right, we're already good enough altitude. And you'll start seeing. Now, this white box is where you're telling the aircraft the airspeed you want it to go to, right? So as you're about a 1/4 inch, maybe we'll go like to 3/4 inch forward. You'll see the rate of your acceleration is going to climb. And when we reach around 60 knots, you're just going to release that pressure, let the stick go back to center, right about there. So you told it, go 62 knots, and it will find 62 knots and maintain 62 knots.
Oh, that's great. So I just went forward till it said 62, released, and it eventually got to 62 and stayed there.
Yeah, that was a poor instructor on the first one.
Yeah.
There you go. Naturally, so you're already going. I was going to tell you, go right. Well, parallel essentially.
That's what I was doing, yeah.
I know.
Basically, keeping my distance from the runway to be parallel. Okay.
And what's neat, again, the fact that you're not doing multiple control inputs and maintaining the same altitude. And again, I go through task saturation, right? This time we're talking to tower, we're getting our landing clearance, we're looking out for that TBM that's making a short final approach. Yeah. And we can focus on things we want to focus on, not necessarily consistently having to use our 4 appendages at the same time.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's great. Basically, to have my hands off of everything, the helicopter's flying along, which means I can focus on everything else.
And you know how critical that is in a cockpit sometimes. Yep. So now what we'll do is we'll kind of start coming around to land. So with that thumb lever, let's put our rate of descent somewhere around 300. That's fine. And once you're there, just hold it. That's fine. And just leave it. Now we'll make a right-hand turn. Okay. And honestly, what I do with that is once I get roughly rate of descent I want, we go right, I just leave it there until I'm turned on the runway, and then I estimate what my glide slope looks like, and I'll increase or decrease, just like you would any other aircraft, what your descent's going to look like. And what's really neat about this, too, is make that solid input and then just let it hold. Because the aircraft, again, a little bit fundamentally different way of flying. You're not constantly having to maneuver the aircraft. You're simply providing input. Hey, I want to come right, 10-degree angle bank. You just hold it, and it will maintain that.
Okay. All right. So
yeah, we said, we'll eventually dogleg it. That's sim parallax. You and everyone else does that, okay? Sure. So we got a little slow there. You came back, right? Because what you were doing is your altitude.
I'm pulling back.
Not a problem.
Again, so I've slowed up.
Yeah, so that's fine. So just speed up a little bit.
Yep.
Maybe 50 knots. We're approaching the runway. Here you go. A little more forward on the stick.
Okay. I'll just stay at this altitude.
Yeah,
we're pretty much on glide slope here.
I would agree. Yeah, you look great. Again, I don't care where we land, right? I say that to a pilot, and I know you're like me, type A, so I say that, and you're like, no, I'm going to land right there.
So I'm going to start coming down a couple hundred feet a minute, which at 50 knots seems about right.
Yeah. Just slight left, just nice and easy left. Again, a little different way of flying. It says just easy left here.
Twist or no?
Oh, I'm sorry, left lateral.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
All right, feels like I'm a little fast at 47 here. Yeah. Short final. Time to slow up a little bit.
And keep your descent going. Yeah. There you go. You caught it. See, I'm going to ask we can land there. We'll do another pattern. You're starting to pick up on it. The best thing I do for you is probably just be quiet.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Well, you've done instructions. Sometimes, letting someone feel through it is a better learning.
Sure.
Than not. Okay.
So a little fast.
Come back to the stick a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to tell you something you did that was just fantastic. I'll tell you once we're on the deck.
All right. So I'm just going to basically
start coming down.
Yeah.
Here we go. Airspeed looks great. Slowing down to about 0 knots. Here we go.
I think it's back.
Keep coming down
the center line here.
And just leave right here. Now I would say right about here. You're going forward. Release the thumb. It's fine. Okay. No worries. And then you sped up. That's fine. No worries. Now just come back to the stick.
Yeah.
That's the one, we all have muscle memories depending on the last aircraft we flew.
Sure.
Here we go. Now hold that. Because what I want to show you, something you did very naturally, which a lot of people don't do, a lot of pilots like you and I that have flown our whole life, you saw that you were almost over-controlling and you naturally released, and you saw the aircraft just stabilize.
Yep. I had a feeling that if I just let go, that it was going to maintain those prior inputs. There was no need to constantly hang on and continue to move the controls.
That is one of the hardest muscle memories when I sit with pilots for a lot of hours that it takes me to knock off, because we always want to over control it because that's what we've had to do our whole life.
Yep.
And this just says, no, just tell me kind of what you want and let me do it. Yep. So now we're at the altitude. Again, it's interacting with you. You're at 7 feet, you're 0 airspeed, and it's asking you, do you want to initiate an auto set down?
Sure.
So if you want, you can just slide that down.
Okay. Move the slider down. Auto set down in progress, it says.
And 3 feet, 2, 1.
Ta-da!
Log your first landing.
But that's great. So I can put this in my logbook and log it.
100%. You don't want me signing it. FAA would reject it. But now it's just going again. Assuming at this point he probably wants to sit down. We won't, because we're going to go back up again.
Sure.
We can do a couple things here. Usually, right about now is when I kind of walk through the automatic auto rotation and we talk about what we're going to be doing. We can either do that, but if you want to do one more lap in the pattern, it's up to you.
No, that's okay. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next thing.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to do an auto rotation again. Since we're walking through the explanation, I'll tell you how we view it and what we've been able to install, and then what you will actually do as a pilot. So as you know, you lose an engine, single engine helicopter like the R66, you have a couple seconds in which to react to maintain the energy on that rotor system. And you and I know it's all about energy in that rotor system and try to minimize the rate of descent. So our system will automatically enter the rotation at the engine, right? So there's one less thing that Max and I have to worry about. The second thing it will do, and you'll see when we enter the rotation, it's going to manage your RPM and your airspeed, unless you give it inputs otherwise. And the reason it's going to manage your RPM is, maxing that energy to reduce your rate of descent will, obviously save you bringing it to deck. There's 2 decisions we gave back to the pilot, which actually was a harder operating system solution than just making it fully automatic. The one is where you're going to land, the left and right. And that's a moral decision that a pilot only can make. The system might recognize an open field in front of us. It doesn't know it's Saturday morning at 10 o'clock and there's a soccer tournament going on.
Right.
So that is a decision the pilot and the pilot only can make.
Yep.
The second decision as a helicopter pilot that everyone wants is the way by which you land. we're going to land on the runway today. So we could keep 40 knots if we want, right? But obviously you and I know if we're in undulating terrain out in the middle of the desert, you know, and there's boulders everywhere, we're going to max that 0-0 because I can't get any forward airspeed. So it's two decisions that we took out of that fully automated auto rotation that we did, and we gave back to the pilot.
Got it.
So when we did the auto rotation, and we'll get into it, that's the easy part, and I'll kind of talk you through the different symbology. At about 150 feet, I'll say go ahead and flare, just like a traditional helicopter. All you're going to do is pull back from the stick. I'll kind of, you know, help you a little more, a little less. Okay. And then at some point, I'm going to say level, thumb up. Then you're just going to max the thumb up, and that's going to, you know, give us that final cushion on landing.
Okay. So thumb switch on the top, you're saying at the very end?
Yeah, at the very end, you're just going to go thumb up. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to take off manually because we did it via the system before, hands off. So just go ahead and give me a little bit of thumb up on that thumb wheel.
Okay.
All right, we got a nice little rate of descent going. As we're climbing away from the ground, just go about a quarter forward on that airspeed. And I do this with people because I think if we were flying, right, helicopters want to find that wind line. They want to get through translational lift. And I think this is kind of a sight picture. Again, whether you want to do a low or high, it's up to you. But it's a sight picture we're all kind of accustomed to.
Okay.
And then when the white box hits around 60, just go ahead and bring that stick back. And just hold it there. And then we'll keep the thumb up because we're going to climb to 1,000 feet.
Yep.
All right, let me ready. And whenever you feel kind of comfortable and ready to go, we'll make a right-hand turn.
Yeah, I just, for the heck of it, gave it full thumb up. So
and you saw what happened?
Feet per minute.
Right.
What happened?
No, 1,500 feet per minute, but what it'll also do is look at that rate of climb and judge your potential exceedance, and might minimize these, excuse me, a certain angle of banks and stuff like that, saying, okay, you're going to exceed certain profiles if you do this, and you know that. So
it limited me from getting control, even though I gave it full thumb up.
It did. It protects maximum warn from maximum warn. I will make a right-hand turn when that will kind of loop back around.
What else did you want to go to?
1,000 feet. Yeah.
1,000's good, okay.
Yeah, somewhere around that again. And just keep that right-hand turn in. Here we go. Airspeed's looking good.
Airspeed's looking good because once I release, nothing changes, right? I mean,
it is. It's
kind of nice set and forget.
It is nice.
All right, so we're coming back down the highway here?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
But it really does, and again, I can't explain to enough about people who have never been a pilot a lot. And you feel it, the reduction of task saturation that this aircraft gives you. And in my mind, it's one of the greatest safety features this aircraft offers. Dynamic flight protection, amazing, right? But my ability to figure out, I always say, this thing is my co-pilot, crew chief, flight engineer, and navigator all in one. And I can pull and do whatever I want and take ownership of it, or I can say, hey, you know what, I got something else to worry about.
Sure.
Okay, I think we're enough. So we'll keep this altitude, and we'll just come right, and we'll line ourselves up on the runway. And again, as we're coming down, so I'll be walking through things. Again, left and right, you'll maintain control of, right? Again, we can land anywhere you want, anywhere out here. Doesn't bother me none. So we're going to initiate. Obviously, we're not going to cut engines. There is no engine. So we're going to initiate by bringing that thumb lever all the way down.
Got it.
All right. Release your thumb. Okay, we're in auto rotation. So this is the symbology I'm talking about. So it's going to gauge your airspeed, see how it's starting to manage your airspeed a little bit. Okay. All you're doing is a little bit left and right. There we go. Yeah, just hold, maybe a little bit left, just lightly. We're at 600 feet, descending at 1,700 feet per minute.
Yep, I see the descent right there. Okay, and 2,000 feet per minute.
Yeah,
68 knots, and I've ended up overshooting.
That's all right. We're going to land. We're going to land on flat grass, right? So that's perfect. Okay, right about now, start coming back on the control stick a little bit.
Okay,
a little bit more, more control stick, Come back.
Oh boy,
that's all right. Level off and full thumb.
Full thumb.
Yeah, level forward, off of course. And full thumb forward. Okay, so you can say, now I'm just letting X-plane, let me take this, X-plane's going to still think we're flying.
Okay.
So, I'm going to come up, get out of the bushes. Now, that's the type A in me. That's like, I don't like being in bushes.
No, of course not.
But I've had some people say, well, that's it, right? You and I know, because we've done more practice on rotations, the anticlimactic nature of us talking and I'm pointing stuff out, of doing this auto is dramatic.
Well, it is, because it's an event that requires a lot of work in a very short period of time, and a lot of movements, for example, to keep the RPM within range, keep the speed within range, as well as aiming for the target. Here, it kind of took care of the speed for us automatically and set the descent rate for us. And Yeah, this was an event where I could just kind of sit back and relax, as opposed to, oh my gosh, there's a lot going on.
And it's so hard, you know, I would tell any helicopter about it. Even practice our rotations, if they don't start breathing differently, I'm like, you're a liar. We all do, right? Because there's a lot, you said, a lot going on.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's the risk margins are very small. And again, it's the non-pilots that are like, well, that's it? Because I'll get people that have never flown before, and after about 15 minutes, doing a full auto, and I'm like, that is dramatic. Like,
right.
I try to tell them it's very dramatic. But so you can see everything you need, again, and the aircraft engine fails, automatically enters the auto, but to maintain the RPM, really it's two decisions for the pilot. You know, where do I want to land and how do I want to land, which there's probably not a helicopter pilot in the world that wants that taken away from them, at least not one that I know.
Yep.
Yeah, so typically, I kind of wrap it up here, but Max, I'm going to offer you any discussions or other things you want to see up in the air.
Why don't you talk us through the different buttons that are available on the MFD to switch the panes here? We're currently in map mode. What are the other things that
and now on ground is not going to be available to you because we're not on the ground, right? So you're not going to want to shut the engine or, you know, do the auto land and stuff like that, right? So info, this is telling you at Camarillo where we're at, right? What's available runways, you know, very similar to maybe what you see in other navigation devices. Sure. Utilities, this is probably more in the pre-start where you're actually looking to make sure you get the right version of the software, the operating system. We have our alert page, so this would put up any kind of caution, warnings, advisories that the aircraft is currently experiencing. That's also up there, but you can select it away, right? So if you have caution, now we have ADS-B, again, we had to disengage that for us so that LAX isn't on heightened alert, but this is the alert page. Flight plan, which we haven't really discussed, standard kind of flight plan. You can enter your entire route of flight, whether VFR or IFR. Sure. Your chart for ground operations with the aircraft symbology in the actual aircraft showing where we're at in the airfield. Here you have your nearest airports available, so while you're flying, it's putting up, you know, available landing spots. Different settings you can input as a pilot, right? Everyone, similar to any kind of iPad, everyone's going to want to have their different settings that they like to see and how they see it. And then your audio options for the aircraft.
Got it. So it's kind of like our audio panel.
Exactly.
Okay.
Over here you have your standard controls, but it's all at the tip of your finger with, you know, light controls and warning systems and icing. Obviously some of this is disengaged.
Well, and I hadn't noticed before, sorry. So we've got, it looks like 10 buttons that are for the left half of the MFD and another, maybe 8 buttons for the right half of the MFD.
8 buttons with a large direct to, right? So if you'd like direct to, for CMA is recognizing because we're sitting here right now. Now we also have TAWS information, but we again disengage that, so we're not going to see actual aircraft traffic on our TAWS. This is the one I like the most as a pilot that used to cut off my gloves in my military aircraft so I can feel circuit breakers at night and count them, right? Which is, I think anyone that's never flown an aircraft is like, no, you really do that? Yeah, you really do that. So here you have your entire circuit breaker panel, right? So if the generator were to go online, you simply select, and over here at pop reset, you simply select reset to reset the generator. Offering that option to you in case you don't want to reset the generator for fire, you name it, right?
Okay, so basically we've got electronic circuit breakers here where we can, I mean, for the strobes, can I?
It's going to be inactive for this because we don't have strobes or a generator
in the simulator.
Yeah,
okay, got it. But instead of having to pull physical breakers, I'm going to be touching the screen to pull breakers?
Exactly.
Got it. Okay.
Exactly. Emergency page, we briefly talked about, but again, emergency, you can immediately squawk 7700 and hit the comm button to switch your primary comm to 121.5. Okay. You know, fuel cutoffs, all the things that you're typically in different aircraft reaching around for in a time of great concern and anxiety. It's right here at your fingertips. Again, guide to which operating your system you're using to include databases and your standard bar out for changes in bar out. And autopilot. So for the auto flight, has 2 different options, and I showed you in the primary flight display. You can use this option to simply select the airspeed and altitude you want. You race it up quick, it goes faster. Or you can come down here and enter the speed, heading, or altitude that you desire.
So this is kind of more like a traditional autopilot here, whereas the other almost looks like sliders on an iPad, I would guess.
It's exactly. That's a great way to describe it.
Yep. Okay. But that's kind of one of the key value propositions, I guess, is least expensive, fully IFR
100%.
helicopter.
No, 100%.
Yeah. And that was certainly one of the things that surprised me when I came over to the helicopter world was how little instrument flying is done and how few, certainly the basic helicopters have the capability to fly instruments.
I would agree. And of course, you know, military, right? I grew up that we were instrument Jet Ranger, you know, from day one, instrument rating.
Mm-hmm. it's clear that the time to learn how to hover is pretty short. Not traditional at all.
Well, as you can tell, I was impressed by Skyryse and their Skyryse One product. I think they're going to have a major impact in the industry. If you want to find out more about them, head out on the web to Skyryse, that's SKYRYSE.com. And just a reminder that I love hearing from you, and I read many of your emails on the show. If you'd like to send me a message, just go out to aviationnewstalk.com, click on Contact at the top of the page. That's absolutely the best way to send me a message. And of course, I also want to thank everyone who supports the show in one of the following ways. We love it when you join the club and sign up at aviationnewstalk.com/awesome to support the show financially. You can also do that at aviationnewstalk.com/PayPal. We also love it when you leave a 5-star review on whatever app that you're listening to us on now. But most importantly, please tell one or more of your friends about the show. That's the primary way that we grow the show. So please let your friends know about Aviation News Talk. And of course, if you're in the market for a headset, please consider buying a Lightspeed headset and using one of the links in our show notes, because if you use those links, they will donate to help support the show. So until next time, fly safely, have fun, and keep the blue side up. And remember that you can always go around.
You can always go around. If it don't look right coming down, don't wait until your side's maybe sliding upside down. You